Hello and welcome to this rainy season gardening journal thing, week 7. I think it's 7. Yeah, it's 7. And yeah, so I thought I would start out straight away by saying we have had some rain, which is really nice. Everything is really wet. Not everything is happy about it. You would not know to look at a lot of the native plants or the established plants that there was a drought at all, because they just burst straight back into rainy season mode, which is really good. I thought I would try something a little bit different this week. I will actually try and break it up into chapters. We'll see how that goes once I actually upload it. But for example, so when I'm working on a particular plant, I thought I would organize it all into one little chapter, give it a title at the beginning, such as this one for everyone's least favorite invasive weed. This is Lantana. It was introduced from Mexico as an ornamental, I believe, but it is very invasive. Most of the year all you can do is cut it back or dig it out very aggressively. People recommend burning it, but I find cutting it back and then pulling out what's left when the rain comes works fine. So do that. As a bit of a change of pace, this is the Quinine Tree. It's not actual quinine. I believe that's in a different family. That's a South American plant. This is an African plant. It has been shown to have some mild in vitro effectiveness against malaria. One species of malaria anyway. But I don't know that actually would translate to a medical application, because it has a lot of other toxins, which many of them do when isolated have medical applications, but that is not the point today. Today it is propagating it because that toxicity has a sort of agricultural use as well. This row of guava trees is always getting filled with fruit flies, and the soil underneath them is mostly made up of generations of old guavas and guava leaves, and I thought I could interrupt the chemistry of that by getting something with a very different type of leaf chemistry growing in there, and also just having them in between the guava trees will mean disease transmission and pest transmission from tree to tree should be a bit tougher. To plant them, I mean, ideally I think you probably would take more leaves off than I do, but I've found that the bare minimum is often quite effective for this in the past. The one that these came from is self-seeded, but I've got a fair few around which have been planted very much this way. Basically cut a bit, shove it in the ground, make sure it's standing up and that it's actually in contact with the soil, and take a significant portion of the leaves off just to reduce its water loss. Although at this time of year a lot of prune branches will stay green if the cloud cover and the rain continues. So I'm not convinced it's actually necessary, but I'm still going to do it just to try and give it a slightly better chance, not overboard because I am lazy. This is Winterthorn, which has a very different agricultural application. So this is actually one of the main acacias that's being planted as part of conservation farming, because it has a very unusual deciduous nature. Once it's mature, it tends to have leaves at a time of year when most other plants don't, and it tends to drop a lot of those once we get properly into the rainy season. It then tends to be bare during the rains and then burst back into leaf during the dry season. So it's actually a really interesting, weird lifestyle it has. But one of the other things it has is a lot of thorns, and I don't like walking into thorns at head height. I want this upright as a tree. Its use to me, as far as I know, this is not a gum arabic acacia, so its use to me is essentially as a shade for future fruit trees, coffee crop, perennial vegetable crops down underneath it. So basically we are just taking all of that thorny stuff that's lower down off and trying to chase it up, basically convincing it it's being browsed by something, so it should try and be taller and out of the way. This is Sickle Bush, which you've heard me talk about before if you've watched previous ones of these. It is another acacia, so I'm doing more or less the same here. All of these bushes are ones that I had trained up to single stemmed, and then someone decided they wanted thorny branches to protect vegetables from guinea fowl, and cut them all down to ground level. And so I'm trying to chase them up into single stemmed again. These ones are actually ones that I've done a little bit more on than the thicket you've seen pruned in previous videos. But we have talked about why I value Sickle Bush before, so I wanted to go off on a little aside. This is something I would call, in common speech, an acacia. Acacia is a very old word. It actually appears in the Bible, so far as I understand, which is old. It's one of the oldest written texts, but it more or less translates to thorny, and it probably referred to a plant that is now called Vachellia nilotica, which is a really weird sort of nomenclatural misplacing, but basically Vachellias are straight-thorned African trees which are related to plants like Fadeherbia, the Winterthorn, Dicrostachys, the Sickle Bush, and Senegalias, the hook-thorned acacias, among others, in Africa, but also to the Australian wattles, which are, as far as I know, entirely thornless trees, which now get the genus Acacia because of a little weird quirk basically at a botanical conference, which still seems to get a few African botanists in particular a little bit worked up. So you will hear me refer to plants like this as acacia. Just know that is not an official designation, but that is the common parlance for them. If I was to capitalize acacia and put it in italics, it would mean wattle, and I would cut it down because those are invasive and I don't want them here because they don't belong here. They belong in Australia, where they're perfectly reasonable trees. You may notice also that in the background of this clip, well, to the sides of this clip, you can see a couple of very sorry looking dracaenas that have bent right over. The bending right over is something that I expect, but because of that dry period, I suspect the tops will have died. Usually they'll bend over, drop a few leaves, go a little bit brown, and then straighten back up again, sometimes with a little bit of a kink. But I suspect the tops of them might have died, and hopefully the bottoms have not. If I was just doing this to propagate them, I would just cut the tops off entirely and just plant stem cuttings. But really I want them as markers, so that little fluffy bit on the top is quite useful. Even if it ends up dying, it's still a marker for the line which I'm going to use to plant more smaller trees and shrubs this year, which will eventually be big enough that they don't need a marker, but for now, having a marker, living or dead, is useful to me. So yeah, so they shouldn't look like that at this point. The drooping over, I would not worry about if you're planting them. They will droop, but usually they'll straighten up, and usually they won't go as brown as these ones have gone. Also worth noting, they will very often spring back just from the bottom, so no matter how sad they look, don't give up on them, don't dig them up and throw them out. So on to actually planting some of those smaller things that need markers. This is a mango that may or may not be a variety I do not have. There is an interesting thing with a lot of fruit trees, they don't always breed true. A lot of varieties hybridize. Mangoes, for example, all domestic mangoes, as far as I know, are the same species, which means they hybridize pretty freely. But the fruit was from a tree that was definitely distinct from any that we have. It was a lovely dark purple fruit that turned yellow and ripe. Very large fruit. I'm hoping the offspring will have some of the same traits, and if it doesn't, well, if it's an unpleasant mango that grows, I can always graft. If it's a new variety, I will probably enjoy it. Mangoes are great. So, additional to that, this is something I'm not putting a marker on because I suspect by the end of the rains, by the time comes time to cut grass, this will be quite massive. These are some semi-accidental bamboo cuttings. So these are being planted between existing mango trees, and they should, because they are chock full of cyanide as a plant, they should reduce pest movement between the two, but they should also, hopefully, increase the moisture retention of the soil. There is an irony here. I'm digging up a grass that I don't like because it is flammable and not very nutritious for herbivores, to replace it with another larger grass which is also flammable, not very nutritious for herbivores, but I can actually eat this bamboo, which we might cover in a later video when it's a more appropriate time of year for that. So now this is, not this is currently me digging a spade into the ground, but what I'm about to do is I'm going to plant finally one of the trees that I've wanted to have for a while. I have never had any luck germinating these, so congratulations to whoever did. This is Marula, which is a native fruit tree. It is, you might have heard of the creamy fruity drink Amarula. There is a small problem here. I've only bought two, and I need more than that because they are male and female, and you need one of each. And when they're this size, I can't tell which is which. I don't think there is a way to. So I may need to get a few more of these and plant them. But they are very good at surviving much drier conditions than Zambia has, so this should be climate proof. They should grow fairly fast. They are one of the faster growing trees in the region. I have read that they can start bearing fruit within 3 years. Fruit and edible nuts, again, much more accessible ones than the jackfruit. But I don't think that under the conditions I'm going to grow these, they're going to be at their peak. But you never know, because we get about 4 times in an average year their minimum sort of native range rainfall. So you never know. They might zoom up. Apparently they can grow 1.5 meters in a year in a lot of their range, so we will see how this goes. So yeah, so these are marula trees. I am going to be planting more of these, and yeah, if I'm still making these videos in 3 years' time, we might be in for a surprise. You never know. This is amla, or Indian gooseberry. It's not one I've ever encountered before, and I do have some concerns. I'm planting it in light shade, very light shade here. It does say everywhere I can find that it's a plant of full sun, and it will grow in very poor soils in its native range, but its native range is also significantly wetter than we are. It is used for rainforestry establishment, which gives you some notion of where in South Asia it grows naturally. We are not rainforest wet, so I'm hoping a little bit of shade will reduce how much watering it needs in the dry season, and also should protect it from frost, which I'm not sure how well it will tolerate. An additional comment I have on this, there is a website called Useful Tropical Plants. It's tropical.theferns.info, and I love it. I love this website, but I have one major gripe here. They call this a shrub to small tree up to 18 or occasionally 30 meters tall. 18 meters is not a small tree. 30 meters is absolutely not a small tree. So yeah, so that is a small issue I have, but I think with that is it for this week. So I will leave you with this picture of the Neapolitans, who were the chicks in the very first video that I mentioned, now looking quite grown up, but there should also be a content warning, because I'm about to put up a short clip of some animals charging at the camera. This is a warning to any canophobes to just scoot in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, go. I know I'm not really funny, don't worry, but there is about to be a short clip of a grass snake, and so I will leave you with that and see you next Tuesday.